Okay, we come to number one in my top 10 countdown of favourite Christian inspired paintings, and this one is by an artist called Stanley Spencer, Sir Stanley Spencer, and it's called the Cookham Resurrection. It was painted in 1927 and it hangs in Tate Modern in London, or Tate Britain I believe it's now called. When this painting was first displayed in 1928, it received absolutely rave reviews in the British press. A Times art critic described it this way: the most interesting painting pictured by an English artist in the present century. What makes it so astonishing is its combination of careful detail with modern freedom of form. It's as if a pre-Raphaelite had shaken hands with a cubist. This huge painting is set in the grounds of a real church, and that church is Holy Trinity Church, Cookham. This is the Church of England village in which Stanley Spencer lived. In this case, his local churchyard has become the background, has become the setting for the resurrection of the dead. If we look closely, we can see Christ enthroned in the church porch. He's also cradling 3 babies, and standing behind him is God the Father. And Spencer is the main figure that appears in the centre, naked, coming out from the grave. But interesting, this painting also shows Spencer's friends and family and the real inhabitants of the village of which he lived, emerging from their graves, and they're being watched by the figure of God and Christ and even the apostles and the prophets. Locals not only recognized themselves in this artwork when they saw it, but even declared that the local postman could be seen depicted. Now, if we look closely, to the left of the church, we see some of the resurrected are climbing over a stile, and others are making their way to a river. At the very top, we see risen souls being transported to heaven, and they're being transported in pleasure steamers, which is interesting because at this time, Cookham is a village on the Thames, and these pleasure steamers ploughed up and down the River Thames right outside Stanley Spencer's house. Others of the resurrected dead are simply seen to be expecting their own headstones. Now, Spencer's work often expressed his fervent, if somewhat slightly unconventional, Christian faith, and this is especially evident in the series of paintings of the biblical resurrection that he painted, and all set in his home village of Cookham. This, I believe, shows the compassion that he always felt for the souls of fellow men and women, even by framing it by showing a compassion for the future eternal destination of his fellow residents. Spencer believed that the divine rested in all of creation. I believe he saw the home village as a sort of symbolic representation of paradise in which everyone and everything can be invested with a special spiritual significance. I also think he believed this principle could be universally applied anywhere and to everyone if they would just choose to bring God into their everyday lives. As in all of his resurrection painting, Spencer used greys, lavenders and pale greens to suggest a translucently silvery sort of moonlit world. I believe his use in creating this ambiguous light, particularly in this painting, as the figures emerge from the grave, they almost seem to be awakening from a collective dream and are unaware where they have exactly returned to. It's as if they've returned to the world in which they left. But by not choosing to depict the resurrection of the dead in the bright shining sun, as was often the case in Renaissance paintings, he is suggesting that a different resurrection destination may indeed await some of those who are arising. Now, for a long time, Tate Modern in London recreated this sort of sense of a spatial encounter by hanging this painting across a huge set of stairs that led down to a basement restaurant and in fact the toilets. The resurrection suspended over the descent of a set of double stairs down into a sort of underworld of sort. This was a huge painting. They were talking about, if you can imagine, it's roughly the size of a single-decker bus in length and in height. So this position of putting it there for me was powerful, but many at that time suggested that it marginalised the work. But for me, that was an amazing space to mount it. I wish in a sense I'd seen it there, because when I saw it some 20 years ago, it was hanging on a conventional gallery wall. In the original position, over that descent of a cavern, I think would have created an amazing juxtaposition between the under and over worlds of which he seemed to be speaking about. One that seems perfectly in keeping with Spenser's desire to mingle the sacred with the ordinary and the everyday as depicted in this painting. For me, Stanley Spenser is not a religious painter in the classic sense of the word, and I say thank God for that. But rather, he's just a great, great modernist painter whose ideas are inspired by his amazing understanding of Christian doctrine, but imagining it in a contemporary setting using contemporary modern art of his time. He is indeed a translator of thoughts and dreams, brought about and inspired by his religious upbringing, yes, but taken way beyond that into an intensely personal faith. He is, in my view, a classic modern Christian visionary, but set within this modern art context, illustrating the idea of Christian faith as living within a community and living within a community's sense of its own identity of itself. So that's my top 10. Interestingly, the number 1, which I was going to bring you, we've shelved a little, because Paula would love to come back and speak to you at some point in the future about her personal favourite painting, which is Rembrandt's Parable of the Prodigal Son. So you'll have to invite her back to hear about that. Thank you.